It's been 21 days since Israel launched its bombing campaign and subsequent invasion of the Gaza Strip. According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, over 1,065 Palestinians have been killed and over 6,200 have been wounded in what has become one of the bloodiest offenses ever launched in the region. The overwhelming majority of casualties are civilians. On the contrary, 3 Israeli civilians have died due to Hamas-launched rockets, and 48 IDF soldiers have lost their lives. Over the last 24 hours, Israel has bombed more than 70 sites, including Gaza's power plant, the only provider of electricity to the territory's 1.8 million citizens. Additionally, Israel has targeted and shelled dozens of medical facilities, refugee centers, and is wiping out entire families every day. Yet despite the extreme disproportionality of the massacre, there are still thousands of people vehemently defending Israel's right to self-defense. See, according to Israel and its defenders, the skyrocketing Gaza death toll should be blamed on the Palestinians for putting themselves in the line of fire. And the crux of this propaganda all stems back to one single, extremely loaded talking point.
What Hamas wants to do is have a lot of civilian casualties, and they use this strategy of human shields for a reason, because they think it works.
We're using missile defense to protect our civilians, and they're using their civilians to protect their missiles.
A growing number of media outlets are starting to look at how Hamas does use civilians as human shields.
I can't believe that you tell me people don't want to die. There is a culture of martyrdom that we hear about all the time. One of the big differences...
Yes, human shields. From speeches to infographics like this one, the human shield claim has been used as the crux of Israeli propaganda to absolve the government of any accountability. There's only one problem. Besides rockets found in an abandoned school, there's been zero evidence to back up the claim that's regurgitated without question across the media establishment. In an article titled "The Myth of Hamas Human Shields" by The Independent, it reads, some Gazans have admitted they were afraid of criticizing Hamas, but none have said they've been forced by the organization to stay in places of danger and become unwilling human shields. See, for many Palestinians, there's simply nowhere to go. The strip of land they live on is about 25 miles long and is one of the most densely populated places on Earth. Its borders are closed, and many people have made the decision to stay inside their own homes instead of trying to evade death on the streets. In fact, the journalists who have been on the ground in Gaza have reported that they've seen zero evidence as well to back up the human shield claim. Amazingly, despite the loaded term being parroted to absolve Israel of its blatant war crimes, one entity that I could find systematically using human shields is Israel. And here are just 3 examples documented in the past couple years. Look, this cruel and inhumane tactic is internationally banned and a violation of the Geneva Conventions, which is exactly why it's consistently used to demonize the enemy. The establishment wants you to look at these people and say, hey, they want to die. They encourage death. They have such little value for life that they actually shield themselves with other civilians. It's the oldest trick in the book to make people sponsoring the massacre feel better about themselves, which is exactly why we're seeing this unfold in Gaza. The indiscriminate bloodshed isn't seen as horrendous or deliberate by the majority of the people. Instead, it's seen as, oh, well, what are we supposed to do when coalition forces are trying to gather enemies and they're firing behind civilians? I've talked about how propaganda works to make one man's freedom fighter another man's terrorist. And this framework is being used to build cases against the states the government wants to topple. And no talking point is more magical to get this done than that of the enemy's use of human shields. One has to look no further than the infamous Bin Laden compound raid by SEAL Team 6, where U.S. officials claimed he was using his wives as human shields when he was shot. When all was lied and done, officials were forced to admit that there was no use of human shields. In fact, according to the official narrative, the world's most wanted man wasn't even armed when he was allegedly executed. And it's not just bin Laden. In fact, nearly every major world conflict of war involving the U.S. in the last 50 years has included this argument. In Libya, despite Gaddafi being boys with U.S. politicians just the year prior to the NATO bombing campaign, the human shield talking point was used ad nauseum. Hilariously, the only uncorroborated citation of this happening was through the NATO-supported rebel fighters on the ground that ultimately ousted Gaddafi, killing and sodomizing him with a metal pole. In fact, leading up to the Iraq War, Bush included the human shield talking point as a main tenet of his campaign to oust Saddam. Now, there is evidence of Saddam holding people hostage near military targets during the invasion of Kuwait. However, little evidence exists of his systematic use of human shields during his reign. The lack of evidence didn't stop Bush from fear-mongering the world about Saddam's long history of devaluing human life through the use of human shields. Media Roots journalist Robbie Martin even found an entire CIA report dedicated to Saddam's use of human shields during the height of the U.S. propaganda machine, selling the Iraq War. Bush even tried to preemptively justify the mass civilian death toll he knew was certain to come with the invasion by saying that the Iraqi dictator plans to, quote, shield his military and blame coalition forces for civilian casualties that he has caused. Sound familiar? Moving on to Afghanistan, where Taliban militants were accused of, quote, using civilians as human shields, according to government officials. Just another narrative spun by the military with no actual evidence backing it up. But this term has long been applied even before the War on Terror. During the Vietnam War, the Viet Cong was accused of using defenseless civilians as human shields. And during World War II, the Japanese army was accused of doing the same. In both instances, the enemy was painted as having zero regard for human life. Right, because the U.S. military and its partners in crime have so much respect for life, blowing up countries, desecrating culture, slaughtering millions of people, torturing, and holding them indefinitely. Look, every society, culture, and country has extreme aspects to it, and Muslims are no different. But taking the most extreme scenario that exists among the culture and exploiting it to generalize an entire demographic is extremely disingenuous, and frankly, it's racist. And when we use these terms, it paints Muslims or Arabs or Palestinians as different, ignoring that we're all human beings, bleeding the same blood, feeling the same pain, and suffering the loss of our loved ones just the same.